Hello everyone. Let's see some new types of selectors in this session, which is called as pseudo selectors. As a topic, something different from what we have seen up till now. As I told you that whenever an HTML page is received by the browser, a DOM tree is constructed, or the document object model. It's a tree of all the tags within your page. Now there are some properties which cannot be represented inside the tree but are usually seen in your web page. Like for example, let's say this is a sample page that we have over here, and say this is a hyperlink. So in a hyperlink, say for example, when I'm here, this is a link, and when I am over it, this is called the hover state. Like for example, in some pages you will see that when you put your cursor over the link, the color changes or something happens. So this is called the hover state. So the thing is, these states of any hyperlink are not part of the DOM tree. So suppose if I want to style something like that, which are not part of the DOM tree, okay, so any so selectors or types of selectors which are used when you want to style something which is not part of the DOM tree, we call these selectors as pseudo selectors. Okay, now there are two types of pseudo selectors. We'll see both of them in this session, in this screencast. The first one is called a pseudo-class selector. Okay, let's put them over here. Let's put them like a comment which is called a pseudo-class selector. Now what do you mean by a pseudo-class selector? A pseudo-class selector is used for styling those elements, the states of those elements which cannot be represented by the DOM tree. Okay, so those elements which cannot be represented by the DOM tree, the states of those elements. Now for the case study, we are going to see two of them, one for the forms and one for the hyperlink. Now I have this diagram over here which is the state diagram for a hyperlink. So whenever a page loads, the hyperlink is in a state called link. Over here you can see that this page, this is a blue color with an underline. This state is called the link state, because that means when the page loads, this is the first state it comes in. Now when you put your mouse over it, it changes from the link state to the hover state. As I told you that whenever you put your cursor over the link, it changes into the state. The problem is that there's no hover state defined for this by default, so nothing happens when I put my cursor over it. Now when I'm in the hover state, if I am clicking on it, like my button is still pressed without releasing the button, this state, it goes into another state called as active state. Okay, for example, if I go over here, I click on this button, see the color of my link changed from being blue to red now. So this means this state is called the active state, and I'm still pressing my button, I didn't release it. If I release it, it will go to that page. So if I release that button, it opens the new page inside the new browser. So now when I release it, it goes to that page. Okay, so this becomes my active state when I'm pressing on it. When I release it, it goes to the visited state. That means now I have gone to the page, so it's no longer a new page, which is the link state. It goes into the visited state, and then it keeps on going into the visited state unless and until you clear your cache, restart your browser or something, it still remains in the visited state. Okay, so let's see how the visited state looks like. Let's see, we go back, you see the color of this has changed from blue to purple. This purple means I have already visited it. Now it remains the same, because now once I have visited it, it always remains the same unless and until I refresh my browser, clear the memory, clear the cache, then it will go back to the color blue. That was the initial state. So these are the states. This is the state diagram that is used for different states of hyperlinks within your page. Now if you want to style these are not represented by a selector, the normal selectors that we did using the DOM tree. These are states of A, which cannot be done with our normal knowledge up till now. So to do that, CSS provides you something called as pseudo-class selectors. Now how do we use them? Now let's go back to our CSS file and see how can we use those selectors to style that. Now whenever you are using pseudo class selectors, first you put the class, first you put the element name which you want to apply the style to, and then you put a colon, a single colon, and then you write the state of that. So for example, you remember the diagram that I just showed you, this diagram, it has link, hover, active and visited. So for example, let's say when it's in the link state, I want to change the color. Instead of blue, by default you just saw that it was blue color, and so I don't want it to be blue color. Let's say by default I want it to be color red. Okay, and the other one is the hover state. So whenever I'm over it, you will see that the color should be changed to, let's say, blue this time. Okay, and then when it's inside the, because however it was not defined earlier, it was the same as the link, so now I'm changing it to blue now, or blue. Let's not keep it blue, let's give it, let's say, yellow or black. I can use black. Now when I'm on clicking on it, so it becomes on the active state. When I'm just clicking on it, it was previously red color as you saw. Now I can change it to, this time I'll change it to blue. Okay, and the last one, which is the visited state, which was initially purple as you saw that, let me change it to green. Okay, so these are the things. I changed the link state, which was initially blue, to red. The hover state was again not defined, so I'm changing it to black now. Active was initially red, I'm changing it to blue, and visited was initially purple, and now I'm changing it to green. Okay, now when we go back, you see that, okay, okay, let's see if it has changed that or not. No, it doesn't do that. So I think it's just gone from being connected, so let me just do it again. Still not doing it, I'm not sure why. Let's see what happened over here. Says sudo.css, went back. Okay, not space, and then why it put the space over here. Okay, let's go back now again. Page, you can see now it's green color because it's already visited. My visited state was green color over here. Now hover should change it to, hovering should change it to color black. It's too blunt to see it. Okay, let's go back and create a new hyperlink. Okay, see the new link now is color red. As you can see there, the link is color red. When I hover over it, it becomes color black, which was our initial intention of coloring it black. Now active, when I'm pressing on it, I want to change it to color blue. So say it color. This is the active state. Now when it opens, you see the color has, it's now visited that state. So now you will see that it became color green. So these are the states for a hyperlink. Now you need to style them, for example, so that you can control the color of all your hyperlinks. So you have to make sure that these 4 states are put for all of them. Put for all of them: link, hover, active, and visited. Now it's not limited to just hyperlinks. We can apply this to even our form elements. You see, in a form element, you can actually apply, not all of them apply to them. Like for example, I want to say that whenever I hover over the input field, I want to change the background color to black and the foreground, the normal color of the text, to white. Okay, so whenever I am hovering on it, just say hover, I want to change it to black, that's it. So I'll put input colon, and this way I want to hover, and then I want to say background color as black. Okay, now when we go back to our normal page, you will see that when I put my cursor over it, it turns to the color black. So this is actually called the hover state. Okay, we cannot see anything because I'm actually typing it, but you cannot see it because the font color is black. So now to fix that, this state, whenever I'm starting to type on it, this state in a form is called the focus state. So if I want to change the color in a focus state, I'll just say input and say focus. And this way I want to change the color now to white so that I can actually see what I'm writing. Yeah, and I put on it, this becomes of white color. Similarly, I put on it, this becomes white color. Okay, there are many of them. You see, I just gave you a link for CSS Almanac. The Almanac is a detailed list of all selectors available. We can find all selectors: class selectors, child selectors, some things that we already saw in previous screencast. We can also see that the ones that I'm doing right now, which is the active pseudo, we see the active selector. We also have, you see, the focus, the one I was telling you about right now. So you can find a complete list of all the selectors over here, pseudo or any selector that we are doing right in this screencast. I was talking about the focus, so this one was the focus one. Now over here, if you see that I have disabled one of the links, which is this. So in disabled ones, you see the color of the text is still the same because I cannot focus on it. I cannot focus, so I cannot change the color. So suppose I want to change the color of the font whenever I am hovering over it, whenever for a normal one. So this state is called the disabled state, already disabled. So I can actually style that as well. For example, I can say input colon disabled, and then say color, say red. Okay, go back and see that it's color red now. It's only for disabled, so it will not affect my other input types. It's only when it is disabled, only when the input is disabled. Similarly, I can actually also, if we can go back to our HTML form, over here we can see that I have put required for password. So that means I need to make sure that they submit this. So whenever we need something to be submitted, we put required. So suppose whenever something is required, that means it's important, what I want to make sure is I want to create a border around it, so it's like heavy. So let's say, for example, input, whenever it's required, I want to create a border around it with, like, say, a thick border of color red and solid. We're going to see what it means by these properties later on, but I'm just going to show. This means it puts a border around the input element of 5 pixels of color red and solid. That means the type of the border is solid. So if we go back, you can see that whenever a field is required, it's important that we need to put it, we just change the color of the border, so I can actually control which one is required and which one is not required. Similarly, as you can see, if you remember in HTML forms, for HTML5 forms, we saw that some of the fields provide us with automatic validation. That means they will say that if you're entering the correct value or not. One of those fields was email, one of them was URL, and some of them were numbers, and these are new HTML fields. So our email, for example, if we type the wrong email and submit it, it will give you an error message saying please enter the correct number. So this state is called valid and invalid, because HTML is actually doing the validation for you. Now suppose if we want to make sure that if you're entering the correct email address, now see, the color is always white. So for example, let's say when I'm entering it and the email address is incorrect, in the wrong format, I want to change the color to red until it becomes in the valid format. So if it's in the valid format, I want to change the font color to green. Okay, so these two again are also part of it. Let's say for example input and say valid. Don't know why I keep on putting the space. Valid, and I say the color, whenever it's valid I want the color to be green, and whenever it's invalid I want the color to be, let's say, red, as we just said. Okay, so now let's go back. See, the other ones, it's green now because it's always valid. So if you just want to target only the email, you can actually use the attribute selector. Remember the attribute selector I told you about? You can just say input over here and then say inside that type equal to email. That means it will not affect other input types, it will affect only the email input type. This way. This is something that we did in the last screencast, which is called attribute selectors. So this way, you see, I'll not change the font color for the password field, but I'll definitely change it for the email. So for example, now suppose I'm typing the email address. See, the email address is incorrect until I start putting, let's say, at something. So that means every email address has to have an at symbol. So that's the validation strategy given to us. So whenever it's valid, it turns into green. Whenever it's invalid, it turns into red. Okay, and however it comes black, and whenever it's required, it has this thick border that I put, and whenever it's disabled, I change the font to this. So there are multiple states we can define for the form elements, multiple states we can define for the hyperlink. So whenever you're targeting working with states of an element in HTML, you can use pseudo-class selectors. So this is all about pseudo-class selectors. Okay. Apart from this, CSS also provides you with something called as I told you in the beginning, there are two types of pseudo selectors provided by CSS, and the first one was pseudo-class selectors, the other one is a pseudo-element selector. Now the difference between these two is, again, the similarity between these two is they both target elements, the properties of the elements which cannot be represented inside the DOM tree. But for CSS class selector, it targets the whole element. It cannot take part of that element. So for example, let's say let's say I want to put a paragraph over here. Let's say outside the form tag, I'm putting a paragraph tag. Let's say I put some text inside that paragraph. I don't want to write the text, so let's just go ahead into this file, and I just want to copy some text from this file, paragraph text from this page. Let's say I have something over here. I just want to copy this text. Okay, copy this text and paste it over here. You will see that my output looks something like this. Let's close this. Okay, so this is the paragraph that I just copied. You can see the font has increased because I used the universal selector. Now, for example, you see in many magazines, you see that whenever you're reading a magazine or a newspaper article, you see that the first letter of the sentence, the first letter of that paragraph is bigger. This is a style that is used by many magazines. Now see, when I want to do that using CSS, I will use the pseudo-element selector, because see, I'm not targeting the whole element. The whole element is a paragraph. I'm just targeting part of that element. So that's why I have to use pseudo-element selector whenever I'm targeting part of an element. Pseudo-class targets the whole element. So hovering hovers over the whole input, focusing hovers over the whole element, or focuses on the whole element. So in order to do that, whenever I'm doing part of that element, you use pseudo-element selectors. Now pseudo-element selectors definition is different from pseudo-class by using, instead of using a single colon, I use 2 colons. Instead of using a single colon, you see over here I was using a single colon, but over here I need to use 2 colons. And the first letter, this is the pseudo selector available for to choose the first letter, and I want to, let's say, change the font size this time. Initially you saw that I put the font size as 30, so I want to increase it to something bigger, so let's say 50 pixels this time. Okay, so if I go back, it will only change the first letter. See that? This is how usually magazines typecast or print set their paragraphs. Okay, there are many of those. Again, as I told you, there are many of them available. Not all of them are really relevant to us for now, but you have the almanac. You can see this over here. You can have all of them. You see, whenever you see double colons before it, that means it is a pseudo element selector. It can be applied to part of the element. Whenever you see a single one, that means it's a pseudo class selector. So that means it can be applied to a state of a particular element. So you can see that there are many of them available over here. See, first letter is the one that we just did. There's also one for first line, so that we can only change the property of the first line inside the paragraph. So for example, if I want to change the first line of this paragraph, and this time I'll say like font style and put it as italics, the first line. So you go back, you can see that in our page the first line is all italicized and the remaining ones are of normal style. Okay, so this is again first letter or first line. We have also a few more. There are only few, very few of them for this. For example, we see you have a placeholder as well. For example, placeholder is actually an attribute of that. So you can actually use an attribute selector, or you can use a placeholder. Okay, a placeholder to actually change whatever is. Now placeholder, whenever you are using it as an attribute in HTML5 was okay, but suppose you have a placeholder when you are not concerned about. So there are many of them, as you can see, but very few of pseudo element selectors, and many, as you can see, the single colons are many of them, and these are all pseudo class selectors. So now you get the difference between both of them. A pseudo class selector will apply the properties to a state which cannot be represented by a DOM tree. The property, the state of an HTML element, whereas a pseudo element selector will apply styles to part of the elements which cannot be represented by the DOM tree. Okay, so this is about pseudo selectors or dynamic selectors in CSS. Thank you.